Okay, good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Zooming into the Parsha. For those of you that are still Zooming in the world today, for those of you that are here live, very much appreciated your attendance. Those of you that are on screen, you'll never know how many people are in or not in the room. But I'm just going to say, whoever is here, thank you very much for coming. It is a pleasure to see human beings over here during this year. Could be one, could be 100. You'll never know. Maybe you'll come next week and you'll find out. Be'ez Hashem. Anyway, we're holding over here by PARSHAS SHELACH, one of the most, I guess we'll call it one of the most devastating parshas in the entire Torah. Because it is in this week's parsha that the Jewish people are condemned, not only to wander around the wilderness for 40 years, but we are also condemned to the day in history that will be sealed forever and ever, called Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th day in the month of Av, which is when Klal Yisrael mourns so sadly the destruction of the first temple, the second Beis HaMikdash, so many challenging and troubling times that befallen the Jewish people on Tisha B'Av. So that being said, whatever events take place in this week's parsha are a lesson, l'dorei doros, for all generations, that we have to learn from. We have to understand. It's already the month. It's holding by the end of the month of Sivan. We're already heading towards the month of Tammuz. Once Tammuz comes, that means we head into the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks brings us to the month of Av, and that brings us to Tisha B'Av. Before you know, we're sitting on the ground once again. And it all starts in this week's parsha. It all starts because the Jewish people were told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu they're going to go into the land of Eretz Yisrael. It's time to inherit that great piece of land that we've been waiting for all of these years. And the Jewish people, they say the following: we're ready to go, kind of. Let's just send some spies into the land for us to see what's going on. And the rest is history, as they say. The spies go in. The spies see the beautiful land of Eretz Yisrael. And yet they also see things that are frightening to them: the size, the people, size of the peiros, the fruits itself, funerals left and right wherever they're looking. And they decide that, you know what, we cannot go into Eretz Yisrael. We're not going to speak tonight what's all the reasons why they wouldn't want to go, but there are many deep and many valuable reasons why. But then they come, and when they come back to Klal Yisrael to tell over their reports about the land of Israel, they make a grave error, and that is they start speaking Lashon Hara, gossip and evil speech about the land of Eretz Yisrael. Now we learn in Halacha that a person is not allowed to speak Lashon Hara about another human being, about another Jew. You can't say foul words and gossip words and derogatory words that are going to shame him or put him down and make him look bad in the eyes of others. And the parsha over here is telling us you cannot speak Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael either. Eretz Yisrael, the Heilig, the holy land of Israel, the land that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to our forefathers, the land that has a neshama, has a soul in and of itself, which breeds Kedusha. Everybody who goes to Eretz Yisrael knows that. You get off the plane, you feel the air already, you feel something different. You go to the Kaisla Maravi, the Western Wall, you're walking, you didn't even get to the wall yet, and already you can feel the aura of Kedusha, of holiness and sanctity that is there. Take a tiyul, travel around the country, see the land from one end to the other, go to all the holy spots and the places, walk in the forest, some place in Eretz Yisrael, you'll feel everywhere that you are. There's a sanctity, there's a holiness, and there's a purity that exists in that land that does not exist any other place in the world. And therefore, you're not allowed to say Lashon Hara about the land of Eretz Yisrael. It's very hard these days. Especially if you turn on the news and you'll see what's going on in politics, very, very hard not to say words of Lashon Hara about the Jewish people and about Eretz Yisrael. But we have to try our best. We have to try our best to guard our tongues, not only from speaking about other Jews, but guard our tongues from speaking derogatorily. You see, that's why there's someone in the audience just to help me speak English tonight. Derogatorily about the land of Israel. But Rashi says a fascinating thing at the very beginning of this week's Parsha. It's a Rashi that you could learn your whole life and just say, oh, that's okay, fine, let's go to the next one. And yet, Rabbi Yeruchim Levovitz, the great mashgiach of the Mir from Poland, he says from these few words of Rashi, we learn a magnificent teaching, something that we have to live with literally every single day of our lives. Rashi writes over here, Shlach lecha anoshim, the verse says, send for yourself men, vayisuras eretz Canaan, and go and search out the land, spy out the land of Israel. Loma nismecha parshas meraglim parshas Miriam. Rashi has a very simple question. The end of last week's Parsha, Parshas Ba'aloischa, where it had so many different ideas from beginning till end, at the end of the Parsha, it speaks about Miriam Hanaviah, Miriam, the prophetess, who is the sister of Moshe, and she ends up telling over Lashon Hara about her dear brother Moshe. Now Rashi points out at the end of last week's Parsha, she didn't intend for it to be negative. She didn't intend to say bad things about Moshe Rabbeinu. She said it's unusual that our brother Moshe Rabbeinu, he and his wife have separated from each other, and they will no longer be intimate again. And really, there's like a divorce that has taken place in the life of Moshe Rabbeinu. And we thought he's the leader of Klal Yisrael. He's setting the example of what a fine mensch, a Jewish man is. We would expect that Moshe and his wife are going to remain married. So it's unusual, she said, that he would no longer be married to his wife Tzipporah. So that's all she said. And she's telling her brother Aaron, and the two of them have great reverence for Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no jealousy, there's no hatred that is there, there's no sibling rivalry, there's only love between the three of them. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to her immediately and he says, are you speaking bad about my Moshe? She said, no, I'm not speaking bad. I just sharing with my brother Aaron what I found out. I just think it's unusual. And so Hashem explains to her, do you know why Moshe Rabbeinu can't be with his wife? Moshe Rabbeinu is a Navi that he gets prophecy any second that he wants. Any second that I want to give it to him. It's not like another prophet. Another prophet, there's a build-up, there's a warning, he knows it's going to come. So he has time to prepare himself, purify himself, get himself ready. But Moshe Rabbeinu, I could come to speak to Moshe any single time of the day that I want to, and he's got to be ready to receive that nevuah, that prophecy. He must always be in a state of purity and sanctity. And therefore, if he has a wife and he has relations and he goes into a state where he'll have to go to the mikveh and he'll be impure, I won't be able to come to him and speak to him anytime that I want to. And that's why your brother Moshe is not married any longer to his wife Tzipporah. There's a very deep mystical and spiritual reason behind it. So Miriam, be careful what you say about your brother. Even though you meant nothing negative, even though you were not trying to speak gossip behind his back and make him look down in the eyes, and make Aaron look down on him, even though, nevertheless, you have to be careful with what you say. That's the end of last week's Parsha. Asks Rashi, Lama nismecha parshas meraglim parshas Miriam. Why is it that the Parsha, this Parsha Shelach, which talks about the meraglim, the spies, and the sin of the spies, that they went into the land of Israel to spy out the land, and that's it. All of our history starts from that dark, miserable night when they came and they gave over their reports, and the Jewish people cried, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, B'chisem, b'chisa shel chinam. You cried for no reason. Teido, you should know. Achayech, I swear to you, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I will give you something to cry about every single night on this eve, the 9th of Av, for the rest of history. So ask Rashi, what's the connection? Miriam speaks Lashon Hara, she has to go into quarantine, and now we have the Parsha, the Meraglim of the spies. What's the connection? Why does one come after the other? Which is a famous question throughout Chumash, why certain things are juxtaposed next to each other. When it comes to learning Pirkei Avos, which you learn on Monday nights together, the Maharal and many others, they spend a lot of time always trying to show what's the juxtaposition of one Mishnah to the other. Why this one and this one seems disconnected, but then they find that there's a very deep connection between these words. So you have Miriam on one hand, and you have the Meraglim, the spies on the other hand. What is the connection? Says Rashi, not what you would necessarily think. The simple thing is, well, Miriam spoke Lashon Hara, and they spoke Lashon Hara about the land of Israel, so therefore that's the connection. But Rashi puts a kanate, she puts something very, very deep in there, and he says like this. Lefi shalaksa al iske diba shedibra be'achia. That because Miriam was struck with leprosy as a result of speaking Lashon Hara about her brother Moshe. V'reshayim halalu, and these wicked people, they saw what happened to Miriam, v'laylachu musar, and they did not learn the lesson about how terrible it is to speak Lashon Hara. First of all, Rashi right away calls out these great people as Rishayim, as wicked people. These were the heads of the tribes. These were the great people of the generation. They're known as Anoshim, they're Tzadikim, they're righteous. And Rashi says right away, no, they're not so righteous. They're Rishayim, they're wicked people. Why are they wicked? Because they just finished watching Miriam say Lashon Hara about her brother. They watched her go through the process of leprosy and getting healed and cleansed from it. And then the next thing in the Chumash is, let's go to the land of Israel. Let's see what's going on over there. Let's come back and spread our evil reports filled with gossip mongering and Lashon Hara. Says Rashi, they saw it. They should have taken a lesson and realized Lashon Hara is Lashon Hara is a very bad thing. And they didn't take the musar, they didn't take the lesson, they didn't take the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was trying to give. It seems that Rashi is telling us that if a person confronts situations in life where there clearly is a message that is screaming out to be heard, and a person, if they hear it or they pay attention, but they don't learn the lesson of that message that they're supposed to, and therefore they continue to act in the ways of those that were mistaken before them, or they'll continue to go in their own mistaken ways, says Rashi, that is destruction of the person, of the situation, and in our case, destruction of our nation. So much so, he writes, I'll call them Rishayim, I'll call them wicked. Because a person who sees the hand of Hashem, the word of Hashem in front of their eyes, and they do nothing about it, such a person, that's not a righteous man, that's not an ehrlich, that's not an honest person, that is a rasha, that is a wicked person. They will miss the point of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to tell them. And as we see over here, they make mistakes so grave and erroneous were the mistakes that it cost Klal Yisrael entrance into the land of Israel, which was supposed to be right then, 40 years wandering around in the Midbar, in the wilderness, and a night like no other in our history called Tisha B'Av, which is the destruction of the first temple, the second Beis HaMikdash, and so many other horrible things that befell us. Says Reb Yerucham on these words of Rashi, besides all the tremendous sins that the Jewish people did, that all their complaining and all of their arguing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and sending spies in the first place wasn't necessary. Besides all the other things that they did in the wilderness, their lack of emunah, their lack of faith, they're arguing on Moshe Rabbeinu, they're arguing on Hashem. How about dancing around the Chet Egel, the cow, and everything? Nitpasu beyichud aloi lacham musar mimaisa Miriam. You know what condemned them to 40 years in the wilderness of wandering around? You know what condemned them to that night of Tisha B'Av, which is in history such a terrible night? Not the Egel Azov, not the sin of the golden calf. It wasn't that they ran away from the mountain like little children running away from school. It wasn't that they that it wasn't that Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about her brother. It wasn't that they complained about water. That's not what it did it. Rather, it's because Leilachu Musar Mimaisa Miriam. Because they didn't learn the lesson and they didn't hear the message that they were supposed to learn Musar, the direction. There was the chastisement that they were supposed to receive from watching what took place with Miriam. Ata Shemeya, says Rabbi Yerucham, do you hear what's being said over here? I'm sorry. This is one of the great concepts in the world of Chachma, of wisdom and Musar and self-correction. Whatever you see with your eyes, whatever you will hear with your ears, whatever you will experience, everything you hear, the main reason that you went through that experience and you saw what you saw and you heard what you heard is in order that you will learn your lesson from the message that is inherent in that event, in that situation, in that conversation, in that speech that you overheard or that you heard. Your job then is to take the message and internalize it for yourself, and bring all of the lessons that you are learning to action. Let the wise man or wise woman listen, and increase the takings and the lessons that they have from this that they are witnessing and being a part of. Says Rabbi Yerucham, an incredible concept in the world of Musar and self-improvement and growth. And that is that whatever a person's eyes see, whatever a person's ears will hear, whatever situations they will be involved with in life, whatever we will go through as individuals, as families, as communities, as a universe, everything is for us to learn lessons from, how to apply that to our lives. And if I go through something and I learn nothing, if I go through a situation and I see things in front of my eyes that clearly HaKadosh Baruch Hu is screaming out a message, and I learn nothing from it because I push it off to just chance or the like, or I'm not sensitive enough because I'm too much wrapped up in myself and my world to hear what's going on around me. It's like a person who walks around, they could have their earbuds in their ears, and they walk into the Hollywood Bowl. I heard one day it's going to open up again. Maybe it did. And they walk in and there is a symphony, 60-piece orchestra, symphonic symphony at the Hollywood Bowl. And the guy walks in and he's got his earbuds blasting heavy metal music in his ears. And everybody's entranced by the symphonic music of that beautiful ensemble. And this person is busy blowing his brains out with heavy metal music. He cannot hear the beautiful music that is there in front of him. He misses the quiver of the violin. He doesn't hear the mastery of the piano. He doesn't get to hear how the wind's instruments all play in symphony together to make the most beautiful sounds, because he's busy, he's deafening himself with something else that is there. Says Rabbi Yerucham, the whole world is like a Beis HaSefer, it's like a school where we are able to learn and we are being taught things from. The whole world has its teachers, whether it be the weather, whether it be the events of the world, whether it be the people that we come in contact, whether it be a seemingly meaningless conversation. Yet in that meaningless conversation, there's so much that we can learn. A person goes through that, but they're deaf. They've got the heavy metal music blasting in their ears, or they've got their eyes closed so they don't see what's going on in front of them. Chaval, what a waste. What a waste of a moment. The famous story of the Yisrael Salanter, One of the stories that they claim made him the great Rav Yisrael Salanter. He was once walking past, he left the Beis Midrash late at night after learning till the wee hours of the morning. And he's walking through the marketplace and he looks inside of a window and he sees a light, he sees a candle on. And he can't believe it. There's a candle so late at night on, burning. And he looks and he sees it's the shoemaker's shop. And he's shocked. What is the shoemaker doing up? What's he doing? So Rav Yisrael Salanter knocks on the door. And the man says, come in. And he walks inside and he says, tell me, Rabbi Yid, what are you doing at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? What are you doing awake? And he sees that the shoemaker is fixing a pair of shoes. And he says over the following words, Kol zman sha'ner doilek, as long as the candle is burning, yesh l'sakein, there is what to fix in this world. As long as the candle is burning, there is what to fix in this world. Rav Yisrael Salanter was seized with a tremendous hisayrus and elevation inspiration. And he went on to say for the rest of his life what he learned from this simple shoemaker in the middle of the night. And that is that as long as the candle is burning, said Rav Yisrael Salanter, the candle is what? Ner Elokim Nishmas Adam. The candle is the soul of man. As long as the soul of man is burning, so yesh l'sakin, there's time in this world for a person to correct themselves and fix themselves and make themselves better. And therefore, the rest of his life, he lived by this credo from a simple statement, from a simple Jew who was making a pair of shoes by candlelight in the middle of the night. Says Rabbi Yerucham, that's what life is all about. Life is not only what you're going to learn in the Svarim, in the books, of course, it's all in there. And we have to learn as much as we can that develops our mind to think in the right way. But there are so many other things, people and places and experiences that we'll be exposed to, that the goal is to learn from them and change as a result of that. I had a good friend years ago. He and his brother both became Balei Tshuva. And then his sister became a Balei Tshuva as well. And so the parents were greatly outnumbered. It was 3 against 2. So they said, you know what? The mother said, if you can't beat him, join him. So the mother decides she's ready to start keeping, slowly but surely, she's ready to start keeping mitzvahs. Let's start with Shabbos and Kashrus. So she started with a kosher home. It wasn't so difficult to keep a kosher home these days. Pretty simple. There's plenty of kosher markets, even in the not kosher markets. There's plenty of kosher food that is there. It's pretty easy. Shabbos was a little bit more challenging. Where they lived was far away from the nearest shul. So to go to shul on Shabbos, if you want to keep Shabbos, means you can't drive. So what are they going to do? They live so far away, they can't walk so many miles to get there. So the wife says to her husband, listen, I want to keep Shabbos. We live out in the boondocks, far away from the shul. It's very difficult. We don't have any community around there. She says, I think that we should get a Shabbos apartment. We'll rent an apartment near the shul over there, and we'll settle down there every week for Shabbos, and it'll be a beautiful thing. So the husband said, listen, I'm not holding by Shabbos. I'm not ready to stop working on Shabbos. My biggest day of the week. He had a business where he had to make collections of money. And the day of the week that he would collect the money was on Saturday. And he said, that's my main day, is Saturday. That's when I collect all my money for all the work of the week. I'm not ready for Shabbos yet. And the wife, she chiseled away at her husband. And sure enough, after a certain amount of time, he agreed, okay, look, you want to keep Shabbos? You keep Shabbos. You want to get an apartment, Shabbos apartment? Fine, I'll live with you in the Shabbos apartment over Shabbos, no problem. But I'm not keeping Shabbos. I'm not there. Okay, the wife says, if that's what you want, fine. They rent an apartment. They're now down the block from the shul. She's very happy. She wakes up in the morning, Saturday after morning. She goes to the shul. She's there for the drasha, for the kiddush. She comes home. She's ready for the meal. And her husband wakes up in the morning, and he says goodbye to his wife. I'm going downtown. I got to collect all the money. I'll see you for lunch. First Shabbos in the Shabbos apartment. She wakes up in the morning, she heads off to shul. The husband wakes up in the morning, jumps in his car and heads downtown to go collect his money. He goes and he makes his rounds, gets thousands and thousands of dollars of cash in his pocket. He's heading to his car and he hears, "Hands up!" And he looks, what? And he sees that there are a couple of hoodlums that are there, and they are flashing a gun at him, and they say, "Hands up, give us all your money." So he said, "Give us your money. We know you have money." They come close to him. He pulls out the wad of thousands of dollars of cash. He gives it to these men, and they go running away. And he gets in his car and says, "What is that all about? For years and years and years and years, I'm doing this every Saturday, and I never got robbed before." He comes home, tells his wife. His wife is happy. She's glowing. She had a beautiful Shabbos experience in the shul. And she sees he looks a little bit perturbed. She says, "Honey, what's the matter?" He said, "It's so weird. For years and years and years, I never had a problem with anybody stealing from me. Today I was held up at gunpoint and they took all my money." She said, "Shabbos, I told you have to keep Shabbos." He said, "I'm not keeping Shabbos. I told you I'm not holding there." Okay. Next week, they go back to the regular house. Comes Friday, they move into the Shabbos apartment. Shabbos morning, she wakes up, she goes off to shul, he heads off downtown again, collects his thousands and thousands of dollars, getting into his car, hands up. He looks, and it's another chevra over there, and they're dangling a gun in front of him, and they say, "Give us all of your cash. We know that you have it." And he gives them all the thousands of dollars of cash. Comes home, his wife sees his face. "What happened?" "Same thing. I can't believe it. It's never happened to me before, twice in a row." She said, "Shabbos, I told you we're supposed to keep Shabbos." "No, I'm not keeping Shabbos." Third week, she wakes up in the morning, she goes to shul, davening the kiddush, new friends, everything is great. He goes downtown, makes all of his collections, thousands and thousands of dollars of cash, gets into his car, about to get to his car, hands up, he's robbed the third time. He hands over the money. He gives it to these thieves over here. And as they run away, he says, "Okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I got the point. You want me to keep Shabbos." And sure enough, Lacha Musi took the lesson that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was trying to tell him, and he and his wife lived happily ever after, living a life of Shabbos observance. Says Rabbi Yerucham, you're going to go through life and see so many things. You will hear so many things. The Chavetz Chaim, when he was a young man, he got very ill one year from his learning, the studies, the intense studies. He was having terrible brain headaches, and his head was really in bad shape. The doctors told him, "Listen, Yisrael Meir, you want a short life, you want a long life? You want a long life of learning or a short life of learning?" They said, you've done a number on your head, your eyes and your head, everything. It's too much pressure for you right now, all the learning. You have to stop learning for the next year. You can't learn at all. You need to rest your eyes and rest your head, and you have to stop learning so you get your energy back, and then you'll be able to learn for the rest of your life afterwards. So the Chavetz Chaim said, "I can't learn at all? Nothing that I could learn?" So they said, "Listen, if you learn gently Chumash and Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses, and Navi and the prophets, yeah, that much you can do." And so for the next year of his life, the Chavetz Chaim lay in bed. And whenever he wanted to learn, there was only one thing: Chumash or Navi or Ksuvim or the writings. And in that 1 year, the Chavetz Chaim became a super baki and expert in all of the Chumash and all of the Nevi'im, all the prophets. And for the rest of his life, whenever the Chavetz Chaim would see something going on in the world, whenever he would see a worldwide event, or something within the Jewish people, or something within his town, or within his family, the Chavetz Chaim with Lacha Musi would take the lesson, and he would quote one of those verses somewhere in Tanakh, and he would say, "That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming to teach me in this particular situation." And the Chavetz Chaim said that once that we lost the Nevi'im, the prophets from this world, so how are we going to learn lessons? Who's going to give us mussar? Who's going to chastise us and rebuke us? Said the Chavetz Chaim, the natural events of disaster of this world is the shluchim, they are the messengers that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses to send messages to his nation, to his people, that it's time to wake up and it's time to learn a lesson and it's time to improve ourselves. And therefore, whenever anything was going on in the lifetime of the Chavetz Chaim, where he felt that it was a natural disaster type of a thing, or there were events that were leading up that were difficult to understand, he said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to us. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants something from us at this point, what we're going to do to improve. We have all had a very, very long year and a half. When I was making the newsletter for last week in Shul, so I was going through last year's newsletter, and I saw that last year, Parshas Ba'aleischa was the first Shabbos that we were back in Shul after we'd been shut down before Pesach. So you do the math, that's a long time. Last year already, that was 4 or 5 months. Now we're a year later, about almost a year, a good year and 5 months, a good year and 6 months that we've been struggling through all of this. And now with Baruch Hashem, things are coming back to normal. Almost normal, but not normal. The world will never be normal again. There will always be less traffic, hopefully. There'll always be less people that are going into their offices and to work. There's always going to be more money that's being printed. Inflation's going to be going up. Everyone's always going to be on edge when somebody sneezes or coughs in public from now on. We'll never know what we lost out on during the last year and a half. Did we grow the way we're supposed to? There's always going to be things. The school will never be the same. Friendships, and nothing will ever go back exactly. It feels very normal again. It feels like it's getting close. But there's always going to be something that will be there to remind us of COVID-19, of the coronavirus. And the question now, because now it's really in hindsight. When you're in the midst of it, it's very hard sometimes to see. But now that we're somewhat in hindsight, we have to ask ourselves, did we lachu musar, did we take the messages and the lessons from coronavirus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to learn? Did we ever stop and did we think about this magefa, about this plague, the way in which it worked, the way in which it came, the way in which it has been defeated recently? Did we ever stop throughout this year and a half of our lives and did we ask ourselves, what is the message? What am I supposed to learn from coronavirus and apply it to my life? If all that we learned was that we should keep sanitizer in our cars, so that we should get in the habit of washing our hands after every store that we go into. If all that we learned is that, well, we could actually work out of our homes and not we don't have to go into work and we'll save money on an office space. If all that we learned is that masks are not only were they safe for us during the height of coronavirus, but hey, look, it helps you with my allergies also. So then we have to ask ourselves, are those the messages alone that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to learn from the coronavirus year and a half of our lives? Or does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want us to delve deeper into the virus, deeper into its nature, deeper into its spreading, deeper into all of the shmir, all of the guarding, and the protection that we did from the invisible virus of this world that killed millions of people over the period of 1+ years? Does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or have we ourselves, have we thought long and hard? What is the spiritual message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to send us? Because the truth is, with everything that goes on, that's really what Rabbi Yerucham is saying over here. Everything that goes on in the physical world is a lesson. It's like a mashal, it's a parable for something much deeper in the spiritual realm and the worlds that we are trying to exist in and to grow in. So what's the takeaway of coronavirus? And I think that we spoke about these ideas many times over the last year of our lives. We tried to make some sense of what was going on, to try to pull out a lesson here and a lesson over there. I think one of the most simple, basic ideas that we could take from this entire ordeal is that there are powers in this world. There are diseases in this world. There are magefas. There are pandemics that are in this world that you cannot see, you can't hear, you can't taste, you can't smell. And they're so tiny and infinitesimal, and yet they pack a lethal weapon inside of there. They could literally take a person's life away. And that's in the physical world. But in the spiritual world, a person has to begin to have great respect for themselves and realize inside of me is a neshama Torah, is a pure, lofty soul. And it's very fragile in this physical world. It is very susceptible to disease and to pandemics. It's very susceptible to viruses. And if I'm not going to be careful and guard myself from the spiritual viruses that are out there in this world, if I'm not going to find a way to mask my neshama so that I shouldn't get infected by other people or other places that I come in contact with that have the spiritual virus and a part of them, if I'm not going to learn how to bolster my immune system, how much zinc did the world go through in the last year and a half? How much vitamin D did people take over the last year and a half? How many things were on the cutting edge, the experts telling us, should do this and don't do this, take this, don't take this. We thought this was good, but no, it's not good. Just make sure that this is the regimen that you're on. And you're doing it for the sake of what? Of bolstering the immune system so that even if you'll come in contact with the virus, you'll be protected. You're not going to get it. And even if you get it, it won't be so bad. And then we go through Operation Warp Speed and we end up with a vaccine. Several vaccines, each one to protect our system so that it will ward off and fend away the viruses that are there in the world so that it starts killing the virus. There's no place for it to go anymore. It is weakened to such an extent that even a person that would get it right now, the chances of mortality is very slim. That's all in the physical. But for our spiritual well-being, for our spiritual realm that we live in, we got to protect our spirituality. We have to protect our neshamas, our souls. And there are things in the airwaves. And there are messages that are flying all around. And they're trying to penetrate our wall that is protecting our neshama all of the time. And if we are not careful, and if we are careless, and if we go to a corona party, as those young college folks were known to do, where they went to see could they go to the party and not get corona, until people started dying from them, they realized it was a foolish thing to do. So are we going to these spiritual enemies' corona parties in this world, where we're dancing around with all of these viruses, and we think that we're not going to be affected. And we think that our neshama is going to remain healthy, pure, and strong. Impossible. And that's what coronavirus taught us. When the virus is rampant, you got to wear a mask. And you got to stay 6 feet away from the next person. And if that means you have to stay locked behind closed doors so that you shouldn't get infected by anything, when it's raging, that's what you have to do. And a person has to be careful because we value life. That's what it was all about the last year and a half. We value life so much. We want to live another day, another year, another decade, another few decades we'd like to live. And therefore we did whatever we could to protect our physical life, to try to ensure to the best of our abilities we did not get infected and did not end up in the hospital on a ventilator, chas v'chalila, God forbid. How about our neshamas? Do we take as good a care of our neshamas, of our souls, which is the ikr, by the way, which is the main essence of who we are? Do we take as good care of our neshamas as we have done of our bodies for the last year and a half? Are we cautious where we go, what we watch, what we listen to, what we see? Are we cautious where we hang out, who we hang out with? Are we cautious? Is the neshama is greater than the body? The body, a person will die, they'll go 6 feet under and the body will stay there, but the neshama is going to go up into the heavens. It can live on eternally. So it deserves a great amount of protection and self-awareness. And we have to make sure that we're bolstering our spiritual immune systems by taking the right vitamins and minerals. Torah, davening, chesed, yirah shamayim, amunah, rachmanis on other people, helping others, tzedakah, all the different things that we can be involved with. That is the vitamin pack that a person's going to take for their neshama. So we should be a little bit worried over here as the mask mandate in California even is about to be dropped. And my sons went into one of the stores the other day and they were shocked to see that people were not wearing masks already. It's a free-for-all. You do what you want. So that means that as quickly as Corona came, it's going to be just as quick that we're going to forget about it. So we have to make sure, that we took the lessons. And we have to make sure that over this year, there were a lot of struggles, a lot of difficulties, a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncomfortability and anxiety. All of that is true. But did we learn what we're supposed to learn from the physical virus and the pandemic to the spiritual viruses and pandemics that are raging around the Jewish world, that are taking place all around our neshamas? I just spoke to a very, very chashuv person today. When we're speaking about chinuch habanim, about raising children, and he said to me, he said, I think to myself, this man is probably, I imagine he's in his 60s. He said, I think to myself, because he has children that are still teenagers, I think to myself, he said, how would I do if I was a child in today's generation? I have no idea. I grew up, he said, in a much simpler time, a much cleaner time, a much less spiritually threatening time. He said, I wonder, he said, what would it be if I was today's generation teenager? What would happen to me? I have no idea. No idea at all. But as coronavirus is passing, we have to ask ourselves, what's the lesson we take home with us? Are we going to protect our neshamas? The pandemic, the spiritual pandemic, it doesn't get solved. There's no pure vaccine that the whole world could take right now, and therefore we'll have herd immunity and we have nothing to worry about. The Yetzer Hara, which is part of the pandemic that's been raging since the time in the Garden of Eden, that Yetzer Hara, it never quiets itself. The impurities, the tomb of this world, they just seem to be getting bigger and stronger every single year and every single generation. The nonsense of the world, which we are witnessing in front of our eyes, and all the lures and all the taivas and desires that are there, they just keep getting greater and greater and greater and greater. There's no herd immunity to these spiritual pitfalls that are there in the world, which means that we have an obligation, locha musar, listen to the lesson, learn the lesson. Hear what HaKadosh Baruch has been trying to tell us for the last year and a half, and let's now apply it to our lives. If, in fact, we will be more careful with how we treat our neshamas, if we will guard ourselves more to the things that are going on around us, and not just open ourselves up to all of the germs of this world, if we will watch over our neshamas, the way that we so carefully watched over our physical health through our coronavirus. And some of us were very, very makbid, very strict, and rightfully so. We made sure that we didn't come in contact with anything or anyone where there was even just a chance that they came in contact with it. I once had to quarantine just because a girl in one of the classes that I was teaching who was sitting 12, 14 feet away from me, and I was behind a plexiglass since she was in the room, and 3 days later she got it. I had to quarantine to make sure that I didn't have it and pass it off to somebody else. All the more so on the Ner Elokim Nishmas Adam, that this candle, Hashem's candle in the world, which is the neshama, which is the soul of man, which is so sensitive and so delicate and so pure and so radiant, how much more so do we have to protect it? And we have to build up the immune system to the best of our abilities to make sure that we are strong. And then even when we find ourselves in a compromising situation, which we cannot get ourselves out of, but we have the fortitude and the strength and the character that's not going to pull us in the wrong direction. On the other hand, lo manyenoti, I don't care for it. Because my neshama is what is the ikar, is that which counts the most more than anything. So we're going back to normal as best as we can. And we're trying to stabilize our lives, of our families, schools. Next year, school's going to try to be back as best as it can be. The roads might start filling up with traffic once again. And we won't have that lesson in front of us. So let's take it with us right now. Because if not, what does Rashi say? He calls such people who are deaf to the messages that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends. Those people that are blind to see what is there right in front of their own face. Those people that go through an experience and they learn nothing at all from the experience. Rashi calls them in very harsh words, Reshayim, that's a wicked person. A person who has an opportunity to grow and they don't grow. A person who could strive to higher levels and they stay where they are. A person who goes through an experience in life that could be altering the way that they look at themselves and the world around them and can make a dent inside of them. And they just go like this kid with the heavy metal in his ears, sitting in the symphony, not hearing a single beauty of that music that is playing. Not only is that person lost the moment, but Rashi says that's a rasha. That's a wicked person. We came into this world to get close. It's strong language. We came into this world to cleave to Hashem. We came into this world to allow our neshamas to develop and to grow more and more and more and more. We came into this world to become the greatest spiritual being and entity that we possibly could, to make our tikkunim, our corrections. I mentioned in a previous shir, I mentioned on Shabbos as well, last Thursday, I had the honor, I will call it the honor, to officiate at a levaya at a funeral of a 33-year-old boy who had cerebral palsy. The boy never walked, he never talked. I don't know how much he was able to hear completely. He never went out and did things that normal children do. He didn't have any of that experiences at all. But as a result of that, because his parents will tell you and his siblings will tell you all of this, his neshama was guarded and protected 100% from all of the impurities of this world. He was like toyem tamchet. He never sinned. He never spoke a word of lashon hara. He never heard a word of lashon hara. He never did anything inappropriate. They told me at the Shiva house that the week before he passed away on last Thursday morning. On that Friday, he had been in the hospital. He had a tracheotomy and he was having some issues and difficulties. They had taken him out of the rehab center that he was in. They brought him to the hospital. And he was supposed to get back to the rehab center before Shabbos began. And Shabbos is coming and they told him he's going to get out at 4. No, 4 o'clock comes. No, 5 o'clock. 5 comes 6. No, he's not going to be ready to go till 7 o'clock. And now the mother and her kids are saying, what's going to be? Shabbos is coming. He can't go in a car on Shabbos. And already by this point, they're throwing the mother out of the hospital. COVID, you can't be in the hospital. So the mother calls one of her good friends. And this woman, mind you, is not religious. And she says, my son is in the hospital. We have to go home. And they want to take him out of the hospital and send him back to the rehab center on Shabbos. She says to her friend the following words: my son, in 33 years, was never Machalil Shabbos. He never desecrated the Shabbos. She said for him to leave the hospital now on Shabbos, when it's not Pikuach Nefesh, it's not a matter of life and death, he doesn't have a right to leave the hospital. He must stay there in the hospital over Shabbos. Please, she said, I know you're on the way to visit me. I'm not in the hospital. I know you're on the way. Please do whatever you can that our son doesn't have to leave the hospital on Shabbos. So this woman, this Israeli lady, she comes to the hospital and she starts talking to the nurses and the doctors. And they said, no, the EMT is coming very soon. The ambulance is coming. We're going to take him away 7:45, 8 o'clock at night, whatever, 8:30 we're taking him, we're sending him home. She says, you cannot send this boy home. I refuse to. She says, lady, you're not the mother. You don't have any rights over here. The boy is going home. No, you don't understand. He was never Mechalel Shabbat. He never desecrated Shabbos his whole life. Please don't. The ambulance and the EMT come. And they're getting ready to take this young man out of the hospital on Shabbos to bring him to the rehab center. And this woman walks up to the EMT and she says, you're not taking this boy out of the hospital on Shabbos. And the man says, what is Shabbos? She says, you're not taking him out of here. He's 33 years old. He never desecrated the Sabbath. He's not going to do it today. And the woman convinced the EMT, the ambulance service, and the hospital to leave this young man in the hospital all of Shabbos and not leave until the sun went down on Saturday night. That was the last Shabbos of his life. Thursday morning, he stopped breathing and he died. He was guarded, he was protected, his neshama was safe. The mother told me the following words. She says, you don't know how much our life was enhanced by having a son like this in our midst for 33 years. Don't think that I felt bad for myself. Don't think that I looked down on myself. Don't think that I wished, why didn't I have a son like everybody else? No. I looked at this boy as a yahalom, as a gem. I looked at this boy as a gift, min hashamayim, from the heavens. I looked at this boy as a vessel that allowed me and my family to do so much chesed with him, to become selfless and not selfish, to give and to give and to give and to give. This is a mother who Lacha Musar, she heard the lesson. She learned what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling her. She understood the messages that Hashem was sending her way. And it flowed over to her children and to her friends as well, that a woman who herself doesn't keep Shabbos made sure that this young boy on the last Shabbos of his life would not desecrate the holy Shabbos. That the neshama was protected, it was guarded from coming in contact with anything that would have been even a remnant of impurity or the like. We have heilige neshamas, we have holy souls. Holy, holy, holy souls. I promise we just don't know how holy our souls are. We don't know what we have underneath all the layers of skin and the veins and the sinews. We just don't realize that deep inside of us is a diamond, not in the rough, but it is a diamond that is shining and radiating, piercing lights. And that neshama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu nesata bi that He gave us, it needs to be protected to the best of our abilities. We put on masks so that we wouldn't contract the virus. We sit 6 feet apart so we shouldn't come in contact with the germs. We walked around in our pockets and dangling from our necks. We walked around with the sanitizer. So every time that we thought we might have touched something, today I see a woman standing in the street in the city. This lady looked like she's, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just telling you what I saw with my own eyes. It looked like one of those cartoon characters, like a ghost and a goblin. She looked like she just crawled out of the cemetery. And she's standing at a street light. And the light's not turning. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to press the button. But she didn't want to press the button because maybe there's germs there. So she lifts up her knee all the way to her head. She's very, like a gymnast over here. She lifts up her knee and she presses the button with her knee. That's how careful she is to make sure that she doesn't get any germs from the traffic light. But how about our neshamas? How careful are we with our souls? What we see, where we go, what we read, what we listen to, how we live. The souls are so precious, so holy, so valuable. Im Yetz Hashem, as coronavirus seemingly is coming to an end, at least many aspects of it, and we will go back into regular mode of living. All of the protection that we've built up all the last year and a half, probably going to come down. No masks, we won't sanitize as much. We won't, public gatherings, inside, outdoors, indoors, it's all squeezed together again. But the lesson for our neshamas, that we have to take with us for the rest of our lives. And if we do that, so we're tzaddikim. Kalev ben Yefune and Yoshua ben Nun didn't say one word of Lashon Hara. They were on the same spy expedition. They saw the same gigantic fruits, the same gigantic people, the same amount of levayas of funerals going on. They saw the land itself like everybody else, all the other 10 of the spies saw. However, Lachu Musa, they took the lesson from Miriam and they said, don't dare say a word of Lashon Hara about this land of Israel. Because Miriam just got in big trouble. And we're going to guard ourselves. So just as we have guarded ourselves for the last year and a half, protected ourselves in every which way and form that we possibly could to make sure that we were safe. Even remember, think to ourselves, if there was even a doubt that we thought that we might have contracted them, we're running to the urgent care just to go get another swab, another test to make sure, do I have it, do I not have it? We're always on guard. Our neshamas, they deserve more protection, guarding, and care than that. And if we'll do that, Be'ez Hashem, then we learned a great lesson from the very sour period in our history called COVID-19. But Lachu Musa, we take the lesson to heart. We utilize it to help ourselves grow and improve as Yidden, as individuals, to let our neshamas soar. And Be'ez Hashem, and that's a chus, as coronavirus has ended, or is ending, and life is getting back to normal, just as the whole Chet HaBaraglim, the sin of the spies, was the precursor for the Jewish people being condemned to a life of gullus, of exile for thousands of years, mainly on Tisha B'Av itself. And where did it all start? Ki Lachu Musa, we didn't take the direction and the lessons and the message that we were supposed to, and we ended up speaking Lashon Hara. So perhaps then by taking the Musa now during these times and learning the lessons of COVID-19 for our neshamas, instead of having to be the wandering Jews for the next 1,000 years, it'll be the ultimate tikkun, the correction of that which the Jewish people did in the Midbar. And just as eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu absolved us from that and brought us into Eretz Yisrael, may we be zeicher to carry the glory of our neshamas, the glory of our kedusha, the radiance of the nobility of our souls will come singing and dancing with the ultimate protection, with the Anani HaKavod, the clouds of glory, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shekhinah himself, into Yerushalayim HaKodesh, b'mheira v'yameinu.